Hi guys, we're going to do something a little bit different today. Since we're all in quarantine and in lockdown and we're not really able to get out and shoot as much as we want, it makes it really hard for me to make a lot of the shooting videos that we normally do. So we're going to try something a little bit different. Today I've got Ruby Berry, a member of the Film Shooters Collective, who I'm known for a long time. We're going to do a little bit of an interview. So I hope this is something you guys enjoy. Let's get started. Hey Ruby, how you doing?
How are you doing?
Very, very good. Why don't you introduce yourself for the people who don't know who you are?
Okay, my name is Ruby. I live in eastern Tennessee in the United States, kind of right outside the mountains. I am an avid photographer when I'm actually have the time to do it and the means to do it. I'm self-taught. I guess I've been doing film photography for about 7 years, I think. Been active with the Film Shooters Collective for most of that time. Also do work with She Shoots Film. Um, Kind of try to do a lot of different things. I like to go down rabbit holes, as I say. So if there's something I don't know how to do, I'm going to try to learn how to do it, whether
Awesome.
it's photography related or cooking or baking related. So
Right. Well, on that front, I noticed you've been doing a lot of baking. How does that relate to keeping yourself sane and your whole life as it is right now?
it's for me. I've always been a time to lean, time to clean type person, and staying busy kind of helps with the uncertainty of everything that's going on. I like having a schedule. I spent most of my life cooking or serving in restaurants, so I like the sort of enclosed kind of kitchen work where it's like you start with your prep, you do your things, and then you clean, and then you have your shift drink, and you're done. And I like that sort of sense of things. So mostly, it's just been a means to keep busy, to kind of keep a routine to the day when there's no routine and we don't even know what day it is anymore.
Right.
Yeah. So it's also something I like to do, and it again like it gives me something new to try to teach myself or learn. So
Totally. Have you been? Well, I know you've been integrating a little bit of your photography in the form of video with that. How do the two kind of combine for you?
well, let's just say I realized that I am not as good at making video recordings of myself as I probably should be, given all the things I've learned through photography. It's a little awkward, but being in front of the camera for me, like generally, is very awkward and strange. So it's kind
I
of I have to
understand
get over
that.
that first, So, but it's been, and I think they both kind of satisfy sort of the same thing. I like things that are both a skill and sort of an art. There's an artistic element and a skill set to it, and so that's
Totally.
very much the same way. I mean, it's chemistry, and there's things you have to do, but then there's like things you can do. So
Yeah, totally.
can't really get out, and because this was the year I was going to get back to portraits, and I had all these portrait
Oh no.
projects planned, and then this happened.
And
So
that's all out the window.
yeah, how it's. I mean, I'll get to it eventually. It's just it was kind of unfortunate, that
Yeah.
I I was so excited to get back to it. Now I'm like, so
Right. A little hard to do portrait projects from home.
it is. Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about like going around and shooting my neighbors from like the sidewalk, but it's not quite what I had in mind.
Yeah, totally. So, what got you into photography to start out with? Like, what started this whole project for you?
It's funny. It was, I guess, about 7 or 8 years ago, I got my first iPhone, and I discovered Hipstamatic and Instagram and all the filters that were on there, and they all kind of had names that were related to old film stocks or cameras, and I just thought that was really neat, and so I wanted to teach myself photography. I was at home with a baby and a toddler, kind of losing my mind, and I started saving up to get a digital camera. But in the meantime, I was like, well, I'll teach myself, and found my father-in-law's old SLR up in the attic, and after destroying many rolls of film, finally got a roll of film in there, and eventually, was able to shoot film and then develop film, and then a year later, I built a darkroom, and that's how it goes. So, and that's kind of how I got started. And by the time I had saved up enough money to buy a digital camera, I ended up buying a Mamiya 645 because I was I'm never leaving film now. So
That seems like a good choice in my book. I did you ever go and try digital just to compare the two?
I haven't really. The only digital camera I've really ever had is the one that's on my phone. I think I had like a Kodak point and shoot maybe, forever ago, but I've never really had anything but the camera on my phone. And
Wow. So you've been filmed the whole time.
the whole time. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
I like to stick with what I know. Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. So on the film front, what is your favorite film? Black and white, color? What do you like to shoot and when you load your camera?
It's there's kind of a because my what I do kind of goes in two very opposite directions. For portraits, I prefer medium or large format with portraits, and I black and white portraits is probably will always be kind of my favorite thing to do. And I can't you can't beat Tri-X, but the really retro stocks, the 80S and the 400S,
Oh
are
yeah,
some of my favorite to shoot with. So long as the person I'm shooting doesn't have really pale eyes, but even then you can work on
right.
it. That film's such a beautiful film to use. That's probably still one of my favorites. And then the other kind of alt process soup stuff I use, it doesn't really matter what film I'm using because I'm going to destroy it anyway. But yeah,
Right.
and I still have a big, I had just started shooting cinema stock without the remjet removed, right? Removed the remjet myself. And that kind of just blew my mind. And that's, something that I'd like to do more of too when I start shooting portraits again. Because of the difference between, and like I love Cinestill, but the difference between actually shooting with the remjet on the removing, I just that blew me away. So
Yeah, I really really agree with that. Like the anti-halation layer with the remjet really does make a big difference. The Cinestill stock is really awesome, but if you can remove the remjet yourself, you should because it makes a big difference in the sharpness and
I
it's
was
just amazing.
I was shocked at the difference and how relatively easy it was to do. I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's messy, but everything's messy.
Right.
If you're doing it wrong or right. So yeah, but yeah, the difference to me was just night and day. It was beautiful.
Totally. So you mentioned your alt process stuff. I know we've talked about your film soup project. Why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about that?
I guess about a year and a half ago, I had been talking with someone about doing film soup. I had never done it before, and we were talking about maybe doing like a project or something. And I started thinking about how most of what I knew about film soup, everybody shoots the film first and then soaks it in whatever they're going to soak it in and then develops it. And I started thinking about, well, I bet the results would be more vivid if you did the soup first. And so I just kind of did it just to see if I was right. And then I really liked what I got so much that I just kind of went way down that rabbit hole on it. And, it went from being like, let's just soak it in, vinegar to now I homeschool my two youngest kids. So now we kind of work it into our science stuff where we'll,
Oh,
you know,
fun.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so like the latest one that I really liked was using a potassium iodide solution. And
Oh,
that's
wow.
what, well, yeah, if you can put it in there for about 8 or 9 seconds before it starts to melt everything. So
Oh,
it's
wow.
you got to dunk it in real quick, but the results are amazing. So that's kind of taking it to an 11. I love it because it's the exact opposite of what I normally do. Because I'm a zone system, black and white, carefully lit. And over
Sure.
here, it's like let's set it on fire and see what.
You go all the way from like really structured to really crazy with your film.
Yeah, and it's kind of nice because then I feel like every part of me is spoken for. So it's nice.
That's very cool. So, why don't you describe some of the results you get with some of these images? I know I've seen some of them, and they've got just amazing, crazy hues and colors. But what does this do to the film?
Uh, Basically, there are a couple different things that happens. It can do everything from like baking soda and vinegar is still one of my favorite. The old volcano. It's still one of my favorites because the baking soda does something to the dye pack, so that actually gets in there and affects like the blue green dye packs in the film, and so
Oh,
it has
cool.
these like kind of you know fluorescent green little sparkles on it. Certain things like sugary substance, if you leave it soak, will almost create a rainbow effect how it goes up the film. Other things will just sit on the film, like silica gel is another one of my favorite ones because you crush it up and that kind of sits right on top of the film, so it will create almost like a three-dimensional look to the film.
Oh,
Cooking
cool.
will do that too. So yeah, it just everything kind of has a different kind of does different things to the film, whether it's change how you're viewing the image that's there or affects the color of the film, or like with the potassium iodide, that actually will start to destroy the emulsion a little bit, so it kind of will have like a woven effect on the outside. So
That's super fascinating.
I know, because it's one of these things where who knew you could like just get, go that deep into something that's really just kind of a whimsical type of thing. So, but
Totally.
yeah, it's been, Diet Coke, I will tell you, will destroy your like that's one of the ones that like it. That one was crazy, and that's another thing that I learned is like if you're using a substance that's destructive, I'll try to put something in there that will like cooking oil is one rule. Well, that'll kind of create a safe layer on the film, and so that's why some images they'll be like you can see an image in part of it, and the rest of the film is pretty much trashed. So
Oh, interesting. That's super neat.
well, I like to stay busy.
Sounds like it. Let's see. So, who are some of the photographers that inspire you in your work? That are people that have really given you interesting things to think about, or interesting things to try, or things like that.
Gosh, there's so many. I mean, I think I'm actually more, obviously there's iconic photographers and artists, and I tend to be more like, as far as people that I don't actually know, I tend to be more like movies will have an impact on me, or music, that sort of thing. Like
Oh, sure.
that's something that'll inspire me. But as far as actual people go, it's usually people that I know, like you or one person. Like,
Well, thank you.
I mean, because that's like, I think that there's a thing that when you have a connection with people and a bond over something, the inspiration that you get actually feels safer because there's like an encouraging environment. And I've done more
Sure.
by being inspired by people that I know than I would have ever done, by just like looking at, photographers that I love or whatever. So I think that that's like, to me, inspiration comes kind of like, it's connected to other things in that situation. So it's,
Totally. That makes a lot of sense.
it is, and it's because when I first started learning, I didn't know anything about groups. I didn't know about, the resources that were out there. It was like basically I lurked on APUG, and that's how I learned. And so
Sure.
by the time I found Film Shooters Collective, I was like, this is so great. I could have learned so much more quickly, because when it's interactive and it's a two-way thing, I think that it's just much more, beneficial to everybody.
Yeah, I totally agree, especially with the Film Shooters Collective. Like, it's really cool having a whole group of people who are just there to help each other out. Like, there's nobody who's going to get upset if you're doing something wrong or strange. Like, everyone's just happy to help everybody do anything they'd like to do. It's really cool.
I know, I love it. And there's no, comic book guy from Simpsons moment there.
Right?
Yeah, and it's like everybody's supported, and I like how people, because my big thing is like I love failure, because that's kind of I don't learn unless I fail, and that's
Sure.
one of the things I like about groups like that is that nobody has an ego, that's dependent on being right all the time. People are
Right.
questioning. People are like, I messed up. What did I do here? And there's no like judgment, and that's how things should be,
Totally.
both with skills and with creativity. So it's nice.
Nice. So, what is something that you absolutely hate to shoot? Like, if you had to be stuck on a desert island shooting only one thing, what would be the thing you would like the least?
Oh gosh, I love looking at landscape photography, but I've never been like one for, and I'll say this, like I use nature a lot in the alt process film suit stuff, just because it's got color and shape. But like,
Sure.
I don't personally want to go out and like take, beautiful, exquisite, realistic portraits of flowers or, sunsets or whatever. I do like urban stuff, but like, I've just never been a landscape shooter. That said, I love other people's landscape work, but it's just not a thing. Like, I don't really relish the idea of hauling a camera out to the middle of nowhere and getting bit by mosquitoes or whatever.
I understand that.
Yeah, but it is, it's just not something that if I'm going to be outside, I'd rather be doing outside stuff. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. I find a lot of times that I'll haul my camera out places, and if I don't see anything that really just strikes me that I've got to take the photo, I might not even take a picture that day.
And then I'm the same way too. Like I like things that have a narrative, whether it's like a visual narrative, like portraits, or like things that have I think that's why I prefer like urban stuff over like lands, like sunsets and things. So I like linear aspects. I like when there's some, so I think that might be why. But yeah, if there were
that totally makes sense.
Tree, I might want to take a picture of it, but
Okay, so let's see. What is the worst idea photographically that you have had?
Most of them. I have had, so, I mean, and I'll say this though, like some of my favorite images are the result of a horrible idea, if that makes sense. Like I'll have, like,
Sure.
I remember one time, I'd have tons, I've taken so many awful portraits too. Like I look back and I'm like, I just want to call these people and tell them I'm sorry. Like I really love science fiction, and I'm always trying to, I have great ideas of I'm going to use this and I'm going to use gels and I'm going to have a thing, and it never works. But then I end up with something that's totally not what I expect and is good. But yeah, I had, I wanted, one of these days I'm going to be able to do a photo shoot that is inspired by Blade Runner and actually gets it done. But I've had so many failed Blade Runner attempts that it's not even funny. So yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, the colors and whatnot in Blade Runner are so hard to replicate. I'll confess, I've tried that a few times too, and it is really tough.
It is, and I had like multiple gels, and it just, and I got sort of close, but not. It just, and even then, it just wasn't. The mood wasn't right, the tone wasn't right, the colors weren't right, and
yeah,
I ended up with something I liked, but it wasn't what I wanted. So yeah, my attempts at Blade Runner, yeah, that's been like Blade Runner is like cheese for me. I've never been able to make cheese. I've never been able to make like an actual Blade Runner, like, a inspired shoot. So one of these days, both of those.
I love that it comes back to food again. Like we started out with food and now we're halfway through with food. And like, I love that photography and food seem like they're hand in hand for you.
Well, they are, because they're both things where you can learn as much or as little as you want. And like, there was a period before I discovered photography where I like cooked my way through the CIA pastry and dessert book, because I was miserable. I hated my job. I wanted something to do, and I was like, so I just started teaching myself all of that stuff. And photography is kind of the same way. It's endless. There's always more stuff to learn.
Yeah.
And that's what I like about it. And like when I get in a rut and I hate everything I shoot and I don't want to shoot anything, that's when I teach myself something new. So, and that's, that applies to both cooking, baking, and photography. So it's a nice,
Yeah.
I like being able to have, like when you have a book that you love and it's 1,000 pages and there's like 10 in the series and it's the best thing ever. So that's kind of like photography and baking or that,
Totally.
Time series, but yeah.
Yeah, and that's probably a kind of good tip for this whole quarantine thing. Like if you're stuck in a rut, just go learn something new about the craft and like get yourself out of your rut that way.
I think that's a great idea. And, there's so many things that, and I think there's also so many things that people think that they can't do. Like, I remember, and we've all heard for like, oh, color developing is impossible. You can't do it at home. I didn't do color for like years. And then when I first tried, I was like, this is so easy, y'all.
Right? It's not even that hard.
Yeah, and everything, you can teach yourself and do anything. You may not do it well. You may make a huge mess. You may stain some things and break some things. But,
Yes.
what else are you going to do right now? Get a kit and try it,
The stains cracks me up because it immediately makes me think of my brief period as a wet plate photographer. There are silver stains all over my studio. There are silver stains all over the hall in my house that just don't come off.
Yeah, that's one thing that I thought I would end up doing, but then the closer I got to it, I was like, nah, I'm good. I'm going to stay over here with dry plate and everything else and stains and the cutting, and like I would do so much harm to myself that so I was just like, I'm just going to say no on that one.
Yeah, I loved the process. I love the chemistry and the mad scientistry of it, but it's hard to do and it just didn't fit what I was shooting, so I ended up giving it up.
Yeah, and I think that's it. I think everybody kind of finds like, and I've talked about this before, like I always thought macro photography was so cool, but again, like landscape photography, it just doesn't fit into the way I shoot or what I shoot. And I think that's the same thing with wet plate, is like, I would love to be able to be somebody who did wet plate, but it's just not, it's not going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a couple hanging on my wall that I shot, and it's like, okay, I'm good. We're stopping there.
Check.
Yep, exactly. So what you've talked to us about baking, you've talked to us about film soup. What other projects are you working on?
Well, one of the big things that I had thought about for this year, because I had really wanted to get back to doing portraits, and I had been kind of noodling with the idea of making my own tarot deck for a while, and that's why.
Oh wow!
And so I was gonna everybody that I know was going to get roped into being, being in it. And it would have been like a lot of portraits, and then like the souped images would have been worked into. I still want to do that. Obviously, it's going to have to wait a while, but that's been kind of
Sure.
yeah. But I like the idea of having a big project like that I can do eventually. So
Sure.
I had gotten started, like I was planning it, and but that'll be put. And that's what's weird right now is that so many things are being put on hold. I think it's important to just try to be as flexible as possible. Like I had a show coming up that's supposed to be in May, but that's probably not going to happen. And so
Yeah.
it's, that. So then I'm like, well, let's figure out other places that I can show it later in the year. And so that's, I think right now it's just, I'm just trying to be as flexible as possible and try to think of other things that I can do to fill in on those.
So, is there any questions that you do in these interviews that you really wish people would ask you, but you never get asked?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that I don't know. I like I've talked earlier about failure. I like talking about failure and like mistakes and things because I think that if we're only posting, it's like the social media thought. If we're only posting our best images or our best looking bread or whatever, it's easy for other people to think that they can't meet that standard. And like I think that talking about failures and like I think that that's important and like how long it takes to learn things because like generally I'm a pretty quick learner and I've been teaching myself things for a long time, so I'm kind of predisposed to being good at it, but I'm also not perfect at it and I'm not good at everything. And there have been
Sure.
I've had some massive crushing failures and just things that I've done either stupidly or things that I didn't know how to do, things that I shouldn't have done. Like one time I decided that I was going to try to fix my enlarger, but I didn't know anything about enlargers. At that point, I didn't really know how they work, but I just knew that something wasn't working right. So I got up in there with the screwdriver, as one does when, what else are you going to do?
Right, totally.
And I took something apart and just a whole shower of ball bearings came out, and I was like,
Oh, no.
whoops. Yeah. I will say eventually I got it fixed, but like, I've never let not knowing how to do something stop me. I've got, speaking of the Mamiya 645, I've got an 8019 in parts still upstairs
Oh,
in the dark room. Well, I mean, eventually I'll put it back together. It was one of those, I have a replacement, but there's like it's missing a thing or a screw straightened out or something. Anyhow, eventually I'll get it fixed, but again, I probably shouldn't have started to take it apart. But then other times, like there are things that I'm able to do because people can help me. I took apart on my Hasselblad the Acute Matte focusing screen.
oh yeah.
I took it to a party one time and somebody dropped hummus down the waist level finder.
Oh no.
And so it got spun into, in between the Fresnels. And so, but with the help, with Brett Rogers' help, actually, I was able to take the whole thing apart, which was harrowing, get all of that oil out and put it back together. So sometimes
Wow.
there's a success. Other times it's in pieces in my darkroom still. So we'll see.
Yeah. I think that's a really good thing to point out though, that like you said with social media, we're so programmed that only our best stuff goes online and we only show our best face and every travel photo is perfect and every baby photo is perfect. And it's kind of cool to show, hey, we're all people, like we make mistakes and mistakes is how you learn things. I mean, it's really cool.
It is, and not every, and like for every moment, I think that's like I always have a lot of awkwardness about being in front of the camera. And this last fall, for the first time, I've got one of my best friends is a super talented makeup artist and body painter, Ren Allen, and another friend, Jocelyn Matthews, who's in Film Shooters Collective. They came over and Ren did my makeup. God knows I don't know how to
Cool.
do it. And Jocelyn took pictures, and I did some film self portraits too. And it was like I was dreading it, but it was so much fun and I enjoyed it and I love the results and I love posting like the hilarious outtake results where I look just ridiculous.
Yeah,
And I think that's important because like, it's not a glamour shot, and so I think that that's good for people to see that people are real because I think everybody, if you don't have any self-esteem issues or any sort of self-doubt whatsoever, I don't think you exist. Like I think that everybody kind of questions, where do I fit in with this? And so I think that
yeah,
that's good, to share the weird stuff and the mistakes and everything else.
totally. Well, I think we're putting in a decent amount of time on this. I think we're going to draw towards the end. I like to ask for my last question. Is there anything you want to ask me? We'll flip the script here.
Oh, there's so many things. Okay, what would be your dream photo shooting experience? Camera, location, subject, whatever. Like your dream.
Oh,
You can go
man.
anywhere with any camera and shoot anything.
Oh, that's such a hard one. Whew, man, you're going to make me work for this one. I think, man, it would have to be a Hollywood set in like the 1920s or 1930s with all period correct cars, all period correct costuming, and I would build myself the world's biggest film noir world. I would probably take my Hasselblad and my super speed graphic and do a mix of square images and 4x5 images and just spend the rest of forever taking film noir photos the whole time and just be the happiest clam in the world.
That is well done and beautiful, and I would love to see that. Someday I want to see that happen.
Someday we're going to make that happen.
I would like that.
Well, I think we better wrap it up. We've been on here for a while, and I just want to say I really appreciate you doing this with me. I appreciate you taking time out of your new quarantine lifestyle to hang out with me and my viewers.
Well, thank you. This was great, and this gave me a nice kind of break up to the day. And I've got to go finish making pretzels right now, but this was super fun, and I'm so glad that you asked me to do this. So
likewise, I had a blast. I really appreciate this, and yeah, like you said, it's a good break.
Maybe someday if I get the whole baking YouTube thing up and running, I'll bring you on there.
There you go. I'll tell you a tiny story before we end. We had an Italian exchange student for a year, and I do most of the cooking in our house, and I'm good at cooking. I'm not good at making things that are pretty. And she tried her hardest to make me start a YouTube channel called Ugly Tasty, where I show off the tastiest, ugliest looking things I could bake. So
I love that.
Maybe we'll do a segment on your YouTube channel when you hit it big.
I want to see the ugliest, most delicious things. Like, that's a good idea. I think I would do that.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you, viewers, for watching this interview. I hope you enjoyed it. And hopefully we'll do a few more in the future. If you liked what you saw, let me know down in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching.